And I don't think you should put this off on your builder. Your builder is not the entrepreneur here. Your builder is not the one who's gonna make or lose money from this deal. You are, right? You are the entrepreneur. You are the one starting your first assisted living. Go and learn all these things on the front side. It is so, so important. Welcome back to Assisted Living Investing. And I'm Brett Chotkevys. I own and operate Platinum Resort Assisted Living and Memory Care in Georgetown, Texas. I have used assisted living mansions to build a beautiful life for myself, my family, created financial freedom through this vehicle. So I want to break down how you can get started with your first or your 10th assisted living. And today we are in a series talking about your first steps. What are the first things that you need to do? So we've been breaking down market research, talking to the city, the planning and building department. Today, we're talking about the fire marshal. I think that the second biggest obstacle that you have in starting an assisted living is the fire marshal. After you get past the planning and the zoning, this is the biggest question mark. The person with the most amount of power to block your deal is potentially the fire marshal. There are some huge deal killers that we're gonna go over today so that you know up front, before you start making offers on properties, you've talked to the fire marshal, you've asked these questions, and you know with certainty that you can buy a deal, that you can buy this land or this building and not get blocked, not spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to find out 6 months later that, nope, you can't do this deal. Nope, the fire marshal says it doesn't work for him or her. So what are these questions? What do we need to find out on the front side? Now, first things first, let's find out who is your actual fire marshal. If you are in a bigger city, it's pretty obvious, right? It's your city fire marshal. But if you're more in a rural area or in the country, it may not be so obvious. For me, I am outside of the city limits. And so you might think, oh, I need to go talk to the county fire marshal. But no, it's not, right? For me, the county pays the city fire marshal to come and respond to these calls. So now I have to pull permits with the city fire marshal. So there may be a little bit of confusion, and I've seen people who, both fire marshals, city and county, and maybe even the state fire marshal, if you're out in the country, pass the buck back and forth and say, no, I'm not doing that vacant land. No, it's you. So find out who this is, because you need to ask these questions and you need to first and foremost identify who you need to meet with. So let's identify who our fire marshal is that is showing up that we need to pull permits with. And then we need to find out what permits will we actually need. Whether we are building new construction or converting an existing building, what type of permits do we have to pull? So here are some of the permits that I've had to pull with the fire marshal. So here's kind of a checklist that you can go through and ask. Okay, building permits. In addition to submitting to the city, I had to submit to the fire marshal because he wants to check for egress. He wants to see all of those things. He wants to check emergency lighting, hallway sizes, door placement, all of those kind of things. So the actual building plans for egress. In addition to that, I had permits for the fire sprinklers, a separate permit for fire sprinklers. Again, there was a separate permit for fire alarm as well. And then I had a separate permit for the underground. That's the pipes that come from the city's line to connect to my riser room for fire suppression. That was also a separate permit. So there may be multiple permits that you have to pull or your builder has to pull in addition to your building permit, separate permits with the fire marshal. Okay, so we've identified who your fire marshal is. We've asked what type of permits we need to do. The next thing I want to do that I think is the most important is ask about my potential deal killers. What are some of the things that may block me? And so let's go through a few of them now, because the first one is fire sprinklers. If you're building new construction, I would assume that you're going to put fire sprinklers in. But if you're converting an existing house, you're doing an RAL, it is such a common myth that you can just take any house and make it an assisted living. You have to actually go talk to the city and the fire marshal, right? And most times the fire marshal is going to say, hey, you have to put sprinklers in here. So the next question is, if you have to put sprinklers in, what type of sprinklers are there? So if you want to go look up the sprinkler code, it's NAFP chapter 13. Now this chapter deals with sprinkler systems. The whole chapter would be a full 13, and that's a steel system. That's what I have. But then you can also have exceptions to that chapter, right? There's D and there's R, which are more of a residential style of sprinkler system. So some of these are questions you need to ask, because if you need a full 13, it's a lot of water, it's a lot of pressure, it's a steel system, and it's very, very expensive. It's twice the cost of having a more residential style of system. And if you're in a residential neighborhood and you're converting an existing home, you just may not be able to put in a full 13. There may not be the space, there may not be the water, there may not be the pressure. And that is a big deal killer. And that's what I had to do in my first home conversion. I had to put in a full 13 system and rip the house down to the studs to be able to get and install all of these things. Another thing that may be a deal killer is fire hydrants. Are there fire hydrants on your street? And how close are they to your building? I had to have a fire hydrant within 500 feet of me. But what if there was no fire hydrant there? What if you're in an area that's older and there are no fire hydrants? There's literally just not any on your street. Is that a deal killer? Does that mean you're going to buy this house and go through permits and everything, and then the fire marshal is going to be like, nope, sorry, you can't do it, right? If you don't have fire hydrants, do you have to literally add your own? Do you have to bring it in and put it on a big old tank and pump? That can be crazy, crazy expensive. So find out about fire hydrants. Are they close enough? Do they even have enough water? Because you may have to have a flow test where you open that fire hydrant up, see how much volume of water and pressure comes out. Is it enough for your fire marshal to bring his rig out there and put out a big fire if there was one? There's questions here that you should ask on the front side. Another deal killer is engine parking. Where is that big old fire truck gonna park in an emergency? Can they even get on your driveway? If you have an existing home and driveway, can they get in there? Is it too small? Can they turn around? If you're in a cul-de-sac, can they make that loop, right? There is a code for the amount of space they need to do a U-turn, especially in a small street or a cul-de-sac. They literally may say, nope, you cannot do it on this property because we cannot get our rig in there. We can get it in, then we're stuck, and then we can't get back out. So I will not give you a certificate of occupancy for this area because we cannot get our rig over there. And that is huge. You have to know that on the front side before you go make offers on something. Another thing you need to ask about is egress. In your building, especially if you're converting a home, does the existing building meet current egress? Are there enough doors? Are they close enough? A front door, a back door? Is that ADA compliant? Can you get out the front and back door to a safe spot? What about windows? If you have an older home with odd shaped windows that don't meet current egress, can you use those, or do you have to reframe in new windows that meet current egress codes? And another big thing to consider is your FDC, your fire department connection. Do you have to install one on your building? Do they need a place to hook up their rig to your property in order to supplement the fire suppression? So now the follow-up question is, now do you need a riser room? Can the riser room be inside of your building, or do you have to add like a separate little room on the exterior of your building and frame something out? Because how big of a pipe do you need? Does it have to connect to the underground? Do you need a separate pipe coming from the city's water line underground and rising up into your riser room? So these are the questions that I think are deal killers. These 5 or 6 of them I want to ask on my first conversation. When I go meet with the fire marshal, I want to ask, here are the things that I have experienced that have been potential deal killers for me, right? I want to make sure my property works before I'm making offers on these things. And then from there, I'll have subsequent visits with the fire marshal and ask. I have a list of probably about 20 or 30 questions that I want to get into with the fire marshal. They're not necessarily deal killers, but they're things that I need to figure out for my plans and for my permits, like my fire alarm. What kind of requirements are there for my fire alarm? What type of signages do I need? Do I need a Knox box or a place to hold the keys for the fire department? Do I need a hot box? Do I need a backflow device for my fire suppression? There's so many different things that will affect your bottom line, that will affect your design specs. How many fire extinguishers do you need? Where do they need to be? What type of fire extinguishers do you need to have? You're gonna have so many little questions that it is so important that you go talk to the fire marshal. And I don't think you should put this off on your builder. Your builder is not the entrepreneur here. Your builder is not the one who's gonna make or lose money from this deal. You are, right? You are the entrepreneur. You are the one starting your first assisted living. Go and learn all these things on the front side. It is so, so important. And aside from zoning, this is the biggest thing, right? The parking, the fire sprinklers. People assume that you could just take a house and make it an assisted living without going through all of these checklists, all of these due diligence. Another thing to consider is even if your state for assisted living licensure does not require fire suppression, it does not mean that your local fire marshal will not require it. because you're going to have to comply with the most stringent of all requirements out of anyone you're talking to. That's your state licensure, that's your fire marshal, that's your city building, your city planning. You'll have to balance all of these things and take the most stringent of whatever is required and then make that into your plans and your buildings. So if you want to talk to your fire marshal or your city and you want a checklist, I actually have mine online at palm.university. Hit the free training tab at the top, and then there is a resource download section. Check out my due diligence checklist there. And I also have my fire suppression cheat sheet. It breaks down the difference in the NFPA 13 fire suppression codes. And then if you want more help from there, check out our free training. It is our foundations training. I will teach you everything that you need to know in a clear roadmap, and it is absolutely free. So I hope that this helps you and you can get your first deal done, get past your deal killers, and crush this deal so you can achieve financial freedom and take care of your family.